Hi, everyone. I'm Jack, and welcome to the show. Today, we're going to talk about something pretty important. It's burnout. And to help us understand this better, we have with us Elena. She's an expert on burnout and stress. Welcome, Elena.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me.
So, Elena, I think a lot of people, they hear the word burnout, they think they know what it is, but they may not really. They experience it maybe. Um, what actually is burnout?
Well, burnout is what happens when you feel tired and stressed for a very long time, and it starts to affect your work and even your personal life.
So it's more than just, having a long day and feeling tired.
Yeah.
It sounds serious.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just being tired. The World Health Organization actually they say there are three main parts to burnout.
Okay, three parts. Tell me more. I'm curious.
Yeah, so the first part is this feeling of exhaustion. And that's where you just have no energy left. It's difficult to do even small, simple things.
Okay, so that's exhaustion.
Right. And then the second part is negativism. This is where you start to feel negative about your job, about your life, pretty much everything.
So that's two. Exhaustion, negativism. What's the third part?
The third part is reduced professional efficacy. So you just can't seem to do your work as well. And you might even feel like you're not good at anything anymore.
Wow, so it really affects how you feel and how you work.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that burnout, it's not something that just happens overnight. It's a gradual process that happens over time.
Okay, so how can we know if we're, headed for burnout? What are some of those early warning signs that we should be looking out for?
Well, it all starts with recognizing stress, and stress can manifest itself in different ways. Sometimes you might feel it physically, like you have an upset stomach, maybe you're getting a lot of headaches, or your muscles feel really tense.
I see, so physical symptoms.
Yeah, but stress can also affect you emotionally too, Maybe you start feeling more irritable or anxious than usual.
And I imagine it can even affect your behavior, right?
Hmm.
Like maybe you have trouble concentrating or your sleep patterns change.
Exactly. All those things can be signs of stress, like if you're not sleeping well or you find yourself getting angry easily. Those are things to pay attention to.
Yeah, okay, so it's about being mindful of our bodies and our feelings.
Yes, absolutely.
So we understand what burnout looks like, what it feels like,
Yeah.
but what causes it? What are some of the root causes of burnout?
Well, ultimately burnout is caused by long-term chronic stress. But to really understand how that happens, we need to talk about our nervous system.
Okay, our nervous system, the control center of our body.
Right. And our nervous system, it actually has two main parts. One is called the sympathetic nervous system, and the other one is called the parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay, can you explain a little bit more about those two parts?
Sure. So the sympathetic nervous system, this is what's responsible for what we call the fight or flight response. Basically, when we experience stress, our body releases hormones like adrenaline.
Right, right. And those hormones, they get our heart racing. They prepare us to either fight or run away from danger.
Exactly. It's like our body's ancient survival mechanism kicking in. And then on the flip side, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. And this system, it's responsible for calming our body down, bringing us back to a state of relaxation.
So it's kind of like this balance, right? Stress activates one system,
Yeah.
and then relaxation activates the other.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. But here's the problem. If we're stressed for a prolonged period of time, that sympathetic system, it stays activated, and that eventually leads to exhaustion and ultimately to burnout.
So we need to find ways to activate that parasympathetic nervous system more often, right? To kind of help bring our bodies back into balance.
Exactly. And one way we can do that is through specific breathing techniques.
Oh, breathing techniques. So like taking deep breaths.
Well, it's a little more specific than that. There's a technique called physiological sighing, and it's been shown to be really effective.
Physiological sighing. I've never heard of that. What is it?
So it's kind of a special way of sighing. You take 2 short breaths in, and then you let out 1 long exhale.
Okay, so 2 ins, 1 long out.
Yes. And this type of sighing, it can help to slow down your heart rate and just make you feel more relaxed and calm.
That's a great tip.
Hmm.
I mean, something so simple that we can do anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. And it's a good way to manage that stress in the moment.
Okay, so physiological sighing is a tool we can use to manage stress. But, avoiding burnout, I think it takes more than just breathing exercises, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have to look at other things too, like taking care of ourselves and setting boundaries.
Taking care of ourselves, setting boundaries, those are both important. Those are really important topics when it comes to avoiding burnout. And you mentioned taking care of ourselves. What exactly do you mean by that?
Taking care of ourselves is also called self-care, and self-care basically means doing things that are good for both our body and our mind.
Okay, so self-care, that sounds really important. What would be some good examples of self-care?
Well, one of the most basic things is making sure you're getting enough sleep. It sounds simple, but it's crucial for both your physical and mental well-being. And along with that, eating healthy foods, making sure you're getting the right nutrients.
So those are things that help us take care of our bodies. What about exercise? Is that part of self-care as well?
Absolutely. Exercise is a huge part of self-care, and it's a great way to manage stress.
Okay, so self-care, it's about, making healthy choices for our bodies. But what about our minds? How do we take care of our mental and emotional well-being?
That's a great question, and there are so many things we can do. One of the simplest things is just spending time with people we love, connecting with friends and family. That can really boost our mood and help us feel more supported.
That makes sense. What about some quiet time alone? Is that good for us too?
Yes, definitely. Sometimes we need that time alone to just recharge and de-stress. Things like reading a book, listening to some music, or even trying meditation can be really helpful.
Okay, so it sounds like self-care is all about doing things that make us feel happy and relaxed,
Mhm.
just taking care of our needs, right?
Exactly.
You also mentioned setting boundaries earlier. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means and how it can help us avoid burnout?
Sure. Setting boundaries basically means learning to say no to things, things we don't have time for or that we know will just add to our stress levels.
So it's okay to say no to people, even people we care about.
Yes, it is okay. It can be hard at first, but sometimes we need to protect our time and energy in order to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. Do you have any examples of how we can set boundaries in different areas of our lives?
Well, in workplace, for example, you could set a boundary by deciding not to check your work emails after a certain hour in the evening.
That's a good one. Yeah, create that separation between work and personal time.
Right. And in your personal life, it could be something like limiting the amount of time you spend with people who tend to drain your energy. Or maybe it's just saying no to requests that you don't have time for or that you just don't feel comfortable with.
Setting boundaries, it can definitely be difficult, but it sounds really important for protecting ourselves from burnout.
It really is. It helps us regain a sense of control over our time and our lives.
Okay, so we've talked about self-care, we've talked about setting boundaries, all great ways to manage stress. But but what about all the things we have to do?
Yeah.
Work, family, social obligations. How do we manage all of that without getting completely overwhelmed and burning out?
That's where time management comes in. Time management is all about planning our time carefully so that we can get everything done without feeling constantly stressed and rushed.
Okay, so time management, being organized with our time.
Mm.
Are there any specific tools or techniques that can help us with that?
There are actually. One really helpful tool is called the Eisenhower matrix. And this is a tool that helps us figure out which tasks are the most important and which ones we can maybe delegate or even let go of.
The Eisenhower matrix. What is that exactly?
So it's a pretty simple grid. It has 4 boxes. And these boxes are labeled important and urgent, important but not urgent, not important but urgent, and not important and not urgent.
Okay, so we use this grid to sort of categorize all the tasks and responsibilities we have in our lives. What do we do once we've sorted them into those categories?
Well, the key is to focus on those tasks that are both important and urgent. These are the things that absolutely need to get done right away.
Okay, so those are our top priorities.
Yeah.
What about the tasks that are important but not urgent?
These tasks are still important. They contribute to our long-term goals and well-being, but they don't need to be done right this second. We can schedule time for them later.
And what about the tasks that are not important but urgent? Should we just ignore those?
Well, ideally, we would either delegate those tasks to someone else if possible, or find a way to get them done quickly and efficiently so they're not taking up too much of our time and energy.
Okay, makes sense. And lastly, what about those tasks that fall into that not important and not urgent category?
Honestly, those tasks are often just distractions. If we can, we should try to eliminate them from our to-do list altogether.
So the Eisenhower matrix, it's basically a way for us to visualize and prioritize our tasks, make sure we're focusing on the right things.
Exactly. It can be a really helpful tool for staying organized and focused, which are key to preventing burnout.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of great strategies for avoiding burnout so far. We talked about self-care, setting boundaries, and time management. But I feel like there's more to it than just those practical strategies, right?
You're right. There's one more piece of the puzzle that we need to talk about, and that's our mindset.
our mindset. What do you mean by that?
Well, our mindset refers to our thoughts and beliefs. And, the way we think about things can actually have a big impact on how we experience stress.
Okay, so our thoughts can either add to our stress or help us manage it better. Can you give us some examples of how our mindset can contribute to burnout?
Sure. For example, sometimes we get caught up in this belief that we have to work all the time. We have to be constantly productive in order to be successful.
That's like the whole hustle culture mentality that we hear so much about these days.
Exactly. Hustle culture tells us that we should always be on, always be striving, always be pushing ourselves to the limit. And that can be a recipe for burnout.
So what we need to do is shift our mindset, right?
Hmm.
We need to start believing that it's okay to rest, it's okay to take breaks, it's okay to not be productive all the time.
Absolutely. Rest is not a sign of weakness. It's essential for our physical and mental health.
Yeah, it's like recharging our batteries. We can't run on empty all the time.
And it's also important to make sure that we have hobbies and interests outside of work, things that bring us joy and fulfillment.
Right, having those outlets can really help us feel more balanced and less likely to burn out.
Exactly. It helps us remember that we are more than just our jobs or our responsibilities.
So we've talked about a lot of really helpful strategies today. Self-care, setting boundaries, time management, and now this idea of shifting our mindset. But, I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes, even when we do all of those things, we still might struggle with burnout.
That's very true. And that's why it's so important to remember that asking for help is always an option. And it's okay to do that.
So, we were just talking about how even with all these strategies, sometimes, we might still find ourselves struggling with burnout.
Yeah. And in those cases, it's really important to remember that, it's okay to ask for help.
Okay, so who can we ask for help? Who should we reach out to?
Well, a good place to start is, talking to your doctor or maybe a therapist.
Okay, and how can they help?
They can really help you, understand what you're going through, what's causing your stress. And they can also help you, find ways to cope, find ways to manage those feelings and develop better strategies for, preventing burnout in the future.
So if we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're, feeling those symptoms of burnout, we shouldn't be afraid to reach out for help to get that professional support.
Absolutely not. Asking for help, it's not a sign of weakness. It actually takes a lot of strength to admit that you need help, that you need support.
Shows that you're taking care of yourself.
Exactly. And it can really make a big difference in your life.
Okay, so to kind of sum up everything we've talked about today, avoiding burnout, it really comes down to taking care of ourselves, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We need to listen to our bodies, listen to our minds, pay attention to those early warning signs of stress.
And prioritize, self-care, set those boundaries, manage our time effectively.
And we talked about the importance of, challenging those negative thoughts, those beliefs that might be contributing to our stress.
Rest and relaxation, they're not luxuries, they're necessities.
Yeah, we have to make time for things that bring us joy, things that help us recharge.
If we can do all of those things, we can prevent burnout and ultimately live happier, healthier lives.
And if we're struggling, we know that we can reach out for help, that there are resources available to support us.
Exactly.
Well, Lena, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing all of your expertise on burnout and stress. I think this has been a really helpful conversation.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Jack. I really enjoyed it.
And to all of you listening out there, just remember, you're not alone in this. Burnout is something that a lot of people experience, but it is preventable. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.